Aaliyah walked into the school courtyard that morning, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The air was filled with the usual chatter of students, the clatter of lockers, and the occasional whistle of the teachers moving between classes. She tried to keep her head down, moving quickly past groups of students talking and laughing, trying to avoid drawing attention to herself. Her day had started like any other, with the quiet rhythm of classes and homework, and she hoped it would continue the same way. She had grown used to being careful. People at school knew her as a regular student, quiet, intelligent, and friendly to those who approached her. They didn't know the other part of her life, the part that was secret and precious. She was the adopted daughter of Vin Diesel. It was something she kept private because she wanted to live like any normal girl her age, without anyone treating her differently because of her father's fame. Aaliyah loved the normalcy she had at school, even though it came with its own challenges. Her first class was English, and she slipped into the room, nodding politely at her teacher. She took her usual seat near the window, pulling out her notebook and pen. She tried to focus on the lesson, but her mind wandered just for a moment to the weekend she had spent with her father. They had watched movies together, talked about school, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. Those moments were hers alone, special and private, and she treasured them. Just as she was writing a note in the margin of her notebook, a voice called out from behind her. "Hey, new girl, you think you're too good to talk to us?" The words were rough, full of contempt. Aaliyah turned slightly and saw Jason standing near the doorway. He was the school bully, always looking for someone to target. His friends snickered behind him, waiting for her reaction. Aaliyah felt a chill run down her spine. She had hoped to stay unnoticed today, but it seemed Jason had other plans. She didn't respond immediately, choosing to stay calm and collected. She knew reacting angrily might make things worse. "I'm just here to learn," she said softly, her voice steady even though her heart was racing. Jason laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed through the classroom. "Learn, huh? Let's see how smart you really are outside the classroom then." He shrugged and turned back to his friends, who laughed along with him. Aaliyah tried to ignore them, focusing on the teacher who had already begun the lesson. But the tension didn't leave her. She knew it wasn't over, that Jason would probably find a way to make her day difficult. Throughout the morning, Aaliyah moved through her classes with as much ease as she could muster. She answered questions politely, participated when necessary, and avoided interactions with Jason whenever possible. But he seemed to appear wherever she went, a constant shadow in the background, his presence intimidating and oppressive. She felt the stares of other students, some curious, some sympathetic, and others amused by the situation. The school was a place of social hierarchies, and Jason thrived on making others feel small. During lunch, Aaliyah sat at the edge of the cafeteria, away from the crowded tables. She unwrapped her sandwich and tried to enjoy the brief break, hoping to eat in peace. But it wasn't long before Jason and his friends spotted her. They sauntered over, deliberately slow, their steps heavy and loud. The chatter around them seemed to dim as they approached. "Eating alone again?" Jason said, leaning against the table with a smirk. "You really think you can hide from everyone?" His friends snickered, enjoying the show. Aaliyah looked up at him, meeting his gaze. She didn't flinch. "I like my space," she said simply, taking a bite of her sandwich. Her calm tone seemed to annoy him even more. Jason leaned closer, his voice dropping into a menacing whisper. "You don't know who you're messing with, do you?" There was a challenge in his words, a test to see if she would back down. Aaliyah held her ground, though she could feel the tension building inside her. She wanted to say more, to explain that she wasn't afraid, but she knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to protect her. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, and Aaliyah quickly gathered her things. She moved through the hallways as fast as she could, hoping to avoid another confrontation, but Jason wasn't done. He appeared at the doorway of her next class, leaning casually but with an unmistakable air of threat. "See you later, new girl," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Aaliyah sighed quietly, feeling a mix of frustration and fear. She couldn't let him get to her, but she also couldn't ignore the growing anxiety that his presence caused. She settled into her seat, trying to focus on the lesson, but her mind kept wandering to ways she could handle this situation. She had faced challenges before, yes, but bullying was a different kind of struggle. It wasn't physical danger at first, it was psychological, relentless, and humiliating. After school, Aliyah walked through the quiet streets on her way home. She took deep breaths, trying to shake off the tension from the day. She thought about telling her father, but she also knew he would want to handle it himself. Vin Diesel had always been protective, but he trusted her to navigate normal life situations on her own. Still, she couldn't help but feel a little scared, imagining the confrontation that might happen next. When she got home, she found her father in the living room, reading a script. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "How was school today?" he asked, his voice warm and caring. Aliyah hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "It was okay," she said. She didn't want to worry him unnecessarily, but she knew she couldn't hide the whole truth. Vin Diesel sensed something was off. "Something happened, didn't it?" he asked gently. She nodded slowly, recounting the encounters with Jason, trying to keep her emotions steady. Her father listened quietly, his expression serious but calm. He didn't overreact, but she could tell he was already thinking about the best way to handle the situation. "I understand," he said finally. "We'll figure this out. You're strong and you're smart, but I'll make sure you're safe, okay?" Aliyah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She knew she wasn't alone, and that gave her a sense of strength she hadn't felt before. Even though the school day had been difficult, she realized she could face challenges head-on, especially with the support of her family. That night, she went to bed with her thoughts racing, but also with a newfound determination. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she had the courage to face it. Life wasn't always easy, and people like Jason existed to test her. But she also understood that her worth wasn't defined by bullies or fear. It was defined by her choices, her resilience, and her ability to stand tall, even when the world seemed against her. As she drifted off to sleep, Aliyah made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't let anyone make her feel small. She would stay true to who she was, protect herself, and never be afraid to stand up for herself. And she knew deep down that the days ahead might be challenging, but they would also be a chance to show her inner strength. The school day had been just the beginning, and tomorrow would bring new challenges. But Aliyah felt ready. She was determined to face whatever came her way, to protect her dignity and to live her life on her own terms, with courage and grace. The next day, Aliyah walked into school with a mixture of determination and nervousness. She had spent the evening thinking about the previous day, trying to prepare herself for whatever might happen. Her father's words echoed in her mind. She was strong and capable. She repeated them silently like a mantra, hoping it would give her courage. The morning started quietly enough. She moved through her classes, answering questions and taking notes, doing her best to focus on her studies. But she could feel Jason's presence even before she saw him. He had a way of making his attention impossible to ignore, like a shadow that lingered just out of sight. Aliyah tried to keep her pace steady, ignoring the whispers of his friends, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. During the break between classes, she went to her locker to get her books. She hoped to avoid Jason, but as she turned the corner, she ran right into him. He was leaning against the wall with a grin that made her stomach twist. "Well, well, look who's here," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. His friends were behind him, smirking, enjoying the drama. Aliyah took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "Hello, Jason," she said softly, trying to make it sound casual, even though her heart was pounding. She quickly grabbed her books and tried to step past him, but Jason blocked her path, his body language aggressive. "Not so fast," he said. "I think it's time you learn a little lesson." His tone was menacing, and Aliyah knew he was serious this time. She felt a jolt of fear, but she stood her ground. She couldn't let him see that he scared her completely. Jason shoved her lightly at first, just enough to make her stumble. Aliyah regained her balance quickly, holding her books tightly. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anger rising inside her. She didn't understand why he picked on her, why he thought it was funny to make someone feel small. Jason laughed, a harsh sound that echoed down the hallway. "Because I can," he said simply. "You think you're better than everyone else hiding in your little bubble. Well, I'm here to pop it." He shoved her again, harder this time. Aliyah almost dropped her books but managed to catch them before they hit the floor. A few students nearby started to notice their whispers growing louder. Some watched with curiosity, others with concern, but no one intervened immediately. The situation was tense, and Aliyah could feel her pulse racing. She wanted to escape, to run away from the confrontation, but something inside her told her to stand her ground. Jason's friends stepped closer, forming a small circle around them. "Looks like she's not scared," one of them whispered to another. Their presence made Aliyah feel trapped, the walls of the hallway closing in. Jason leaned closer, his face inches from hers. "I'm going to teach you a lesson you won't forget," he said. His eyes were cold, unrelenting. Aliyah took a deep breath, remembering her father's words about strength. She refused to let him break her spirit. Suddenly, a teacher appeared at the end of the hallway, drawn by the commotion. Jason straightened up quickly, pretending nothing had happened. The teacher's gaze swept over the group, giving Aliyah a moment of relief. Jason's friends laughed quietly, and he muttered something under his breath before stepping back. Aliyah tried to calm herself, adjusting her books and moving toward her next class. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she forced herself to keep her head high. She knew this wasn't over, that Jason would probably try again. But she also felt a sense of pride in herself for not backing down. As the day went on, Aliyah tried to focus on her studies, but her mind kept replaying the encounter. She thought about the ways she could protect herself, the words she might say, and the strength she needed to stand firm. Every glance in the hallway reminded her of Jason's presence, and every step she took was measured carefully. When the final bell rang, she felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had survived the day without a major incident, but she knew it could escalate at any moment. She walked toward the bus stop, hoping to make it home safely and spend time with her father. As she waited, she noticed Jason leaning against a nearby wall, smirking. Her stomach tightened. He hadn't given up, and she could see the determination in his eyes. Aliyah knew she had to stay calm and think carefully about her next steps. Running away wouldn't solve the problem, but standing up for herself required courage she wasn't sure she could summon on her own. The bus arrived, and Aliyah climbed on quickly, choosing a seat near the back where she could observe without being too noticeable. She watched as Jason's friends lingered near the stop, but he didn't get on the bus. She sighed, feeling a small measure of relief. For now, she was safe. When she got home, her father was waiting for her in the kitchen. He looked up from his notes and gave her a warm smile. "How was school today?" he asked. Aliyah hesitated for a moment, then recounted the confrontation with Jason. She described the shoves, the mocking words, and the feeling of being cornered. Her father listened intently, his expression serious but calm. He didn't overreact, but she could see the concern in his eyes. "You handled yourself well," he said finally. "I know it was scary, but you stood your ground. That's important. We'll think about the best way to handle this together." His words gave her a sense of security and reassurance. She knew she wasn't alone, and that gave her the courage to face tomorrow. That evening, Aliyah spent time reflecting on the day. She realized that fear didn't have to control her. She could feel it, acknowledge it, and still choose to act with bravery. She knew that confronting bullies was never easy, but she also understood that avoiding the problem entirely might make it worse. Her father noticed her thoughtful expression and sat beside her. "It's not just about standing up to Jason," he said gently. "It's about knowing your worth, believing in yourself, and protecting your boundaries. You're capable of more than you realize," Aliyah nodded, taking in his words. She felt a sense of determination rising within her. Tomorrow might bring another encounter with Jason, and it might be even more challenging. But she also knew she could face it. She had her father's guidance, her own inner strength, and the knowledge that she didn't have to face this alone. As night fell, she prepared for bed, her mind filled with strategies and plans for the coming days. She knew she would need to be vigilant, cautious, and brave, but she also felt a spark of confidence, a growing understanding that she could navigate this difficult situation with courage and grace. Before closing her eyes, Aliyah made a promise to herself. She would not allow fear or intimidation to dictate her life. She would stand firm, protect herself, and face challenges head-on. And no matter what happened at school, she knew that her strength, her intelligence, and her courage would carry her through. The day had tested her, and she had survived. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them with determination and resolve. Aliyah understood that life was full of obstacles, but she also knew that true strength came from facing them, not running away. And with that thought, she drifted into a deep, determined sleep. ready to face whatever the world would throw at her next. The following morning, Aaliyah woke up with a mixture of determination and anxiety. She had spent the night thinking about the previous day and the confrontation with Jason. She knew he would be watching for another opportunity to assert his power, and she couldn't ignore the possibility that he might escalate. She tried to focus on the school day ahead, reminding herself of her father's words about strength, courage, and self-belief. When she arrived at school, the hallways were bustling with students as usual. Aaliyah moved carefully, her backpack firmly on her shoulders, keeping her head down and avoiding eye contact with groups of students that could pose a threat. She had learned that morning vigilance could prevent many potential confrontations. However, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was about to unfold. Jason was already at the lockers when she approached. His presence was almost magnetic, drawing attention from nearby students. He didn't move immediately, just watched her with a smirk, like a predator sizing up his prey. Aaliyah felt a mixture of fear and resolve. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing her scared, but she couldn't deny the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Jason finally spoke, his voice carrying across the hallway. "Looks like someone is getting used to being watched, huh?" He pushed his shoulder against hers lightly, trying to unbalance her. Aaliyah held her ground, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "I'm not afraid of you," she said quietly, though she knew that it might not deter him. Just then, one of the teachers, who had been observing from a distance, stepped closer. "Is everything all right here?" the teacher asked. Jason quickly straightened up, pretending nothing had happened, and gave a forced smile. The teacher's eyes lingered on him for a moment, then nodded and walked away. Jason's friends snickered quietly, clearly enjoying the small display of control he maintained. Despite the minor reprieve, Aaliyah felt the tension lingering. She went to her first class of the day, trying to focus on her studies, but her mind kept wandering back to Jason. She knew that waiting for someone else to intervene might not be enough. She needed to be prepared for whatever could happen next. Later in the day, during lunch, Aaliyah decided to sit outside the cafeteria. The open space allowed her to see potential threats before they approached. She unpacked her lunch and tried to enjoy the moment of calm, though her nerves remained taut. It was then that her phone buzzed. A text from her father appeared. "Are you okay? Remember, stay calm and be careful. We'll handle this together." Aaliyah felt a surge of comfort. Knowing that her father was aware and ready to act made the weight of the day a little lighter. Not long after, Jason and his friends appeared, approaching her with the same smirk that had unsettled her so many times. Jason stopped a few feet away, trying to look casual but clearly aiming to intimidate. Aaliyah took a deep breath, keeping her posture firm. She didn't look away, meeting his gaze directly. Jason leaned on the nearby railing, pretending to be relaxed. "You know you don't have to be so tough all the time," he said. "It's just easier if you play along and let me handle things." His words were meant to provoke, but Aaliyah remained composed. She knew that showing fear could give him more power than he deserved. Suddenly, the air shifted. A car pulled up near the school entrance, drawing the attention of nearby students. Aaliyah's father, Vin Diesel, stepped out. His presence was commanding, and even from a distance, the authority in his stance was unmistakable. Jason's smirk faltered slightly as he realized that this wasn't going to be a normal day. Vin Diesel approached calmly, his eyes scanning the area until they met Aaliyah's. She felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. He didn't rush in aggressively or yell. Instead, his calm authority seemed to speak louder than words. The crowd of students began to murmur, sensing the tension and the presence of someone important. Jason's friends stepped back, unsure how to react. Jason himself tried to maintain his bravado, but it was clear that he was unnerved. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice attempting to sound casual, but the edge of fear was noticeable. Vin Diesel looked at him steadily. "I'm here because my daughter deserves to be treated with respect," he said simply. His words carried weight, not just because of who he was, but because of the quiet authority and confidence he projected. "And I expect you to remember that." Jason's face turned red, a mix of embarrassment and fear. He realized that he had underestimated the situation, that this was no longer just a game of intimidation. The presence of someone like Vin Diesel shifted the balance completely. He glanced at his friends, who gave subtle nods to retreat, understanding that this encounter had taken a serious turn. Aaliyah watched the scene unfold, her heart still racing but feeling a growing sense of empowerment. She had faced Jason's bullying before, but seeing her father intervene with calm strength reinforced the idea that she wasn't powerless. She realized that courage didn't always have to be loud or aggressive. Sometimes it was the quiet confidence and support of those who cared that made the biggest difference. After a few tense moments, Jason muttered something under his breath and walked away, his friends following quickly. The crowd of students dispersed, some glancing back in awe at what had just occurred. Aaliyah felt a mix of relief and pride. The confrontation had ended and she had survived it without losing her dignity. Vin Diesel knelt down beside her, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Aaliyah nodded. "I am now," she said. She felt a wave of gratitude for his presence, for his guidance, and for the reassurance that she wasn't alone in facing challenges. The fear that had gripped her in the hallways earlier seemed to fade, replaced by a sense of strength she hadn't felt before. He smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were brave just by standing your ground. Remember, it's not always about fighting. Sometimes it's about knowing your worth and letting people understand it without losing yourself." Aaliyah listened, absorbing his words. She understood now that her identity, her strength, and her courage were not just about external protection, but about the way she carried herself, the way she stood up for herself, and the way she refused to let fear control her. That evening, as she settled into her room, she reflected on the events of the day. She had faced the bully, and though the situation could have turned out differently, she had remained composed and strong. Her father's intervention had helped, but she also recognized the personal growth she had experienced. She understood the importance of self-respect, awareness, and the courage to confront challenges with integrity. Aaliyah knew that school life would continue to present obstacles, but she felt ready. The events of today had taught her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. And while Jason's bullying might not have ended completely, she had learned how to navigate it with poise and self-confidence. Before drifting off to sleep, she whispered to herself, "I am strong. I am capable. I am worthy." Those words had never felt more real. She knew that the journey ahead would still have its difficulties, but she was no longer the same girl who had walked nervously into school that morning. She had discovered a strength within herself, a quiet resilience that would guide her through the days to come. The day after Vin Diesel's intervention, the school felt different for Aaliyah. The hallways were the same, filled with students rushing between classes, laughing and chatting, but there was a shift in the atmosphere. She noticed whispers as she walked by, curious glances from classmates who had seen the previous day's events or heard about them. Aaliyah kept her head high, feeling a newfound confidence she hadn't experienced before. She wasn't seeking attention, but she realized that her actions and her father's presence had made a statement. She was not someone to be underestimated. Jason, however, seemed to struggle with the shift. He walked the halls with an uncertain expression, his usual arrogance diminished. He had been used to controlling the narrative through fear, but that control was now shaken. Whispers followed him, and some students even avoided him, aware that his bullying had reached a level where it was no longer acceptable. Aaliyah noticed him watching her from a distance, trying to figure out how to regain his standing. Aaliyah's first class of the day went smoothly. She answered questions confidently, participated actively, and noticed that some of her classmates were giving her encouraging looks. It felt good to see support in small ways, and she realized how important it was to have allies, even in subtle forms. It wasn't about showing off. It was about feeling the collective strength of a supportive environment. During lunch, she sat at a table with a few classmates who had always been friendly. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and shared stories. It was the first time in days that she felt completely relaxed at school. Jason and his friends lingered at a nearby table, but they didn't approach. The tension from before seemed to have lessened, though Aaliyah knew better than to assume it was gone for good. Later in the day, a school administrator called Jason into the office. Aaliyah overheard from a distance that the administration had reviewed reports about his bullying behavior and was taking the matter seriously. There would be consequences, she learned, ranging from detention to meetings with parents. She felt a sense of justice and relief, knowing that the school was taking action to protect students. It wasn't just about her. It was about creating a safer environment for everyone. As the day progressed, Aaliyah reflected on her feelings. She thought about the fear and anxiety she had experienced and how it had changed to a sense of empowerment. She realized that facing challenges didn't mean she had to fight alone. Strength could come from within, from the support of others, and from knowing that she had the courage to stand firm. The lessons she was learning extended beyond school. They were about life, about understanding her worth, and about navigating difficult situations with integrity. After school, Aaliyah walked home with a calm confidence. The street seemed familiar yet different. The events of the past few days had shifted her perspective. She noticed small details she might have ignored before: the leaves rustling in the wind, the smiles of neighbors, the playful laughter of younger children. Life continued, and she was learning to observe it with a new awareness. When she arrived home, Vin Diesel was in the living room, reviewing a script. He looked up as she entered and gave her a warm smile. "How was your day?" he asked. Aaliyah smiled back. "Better," she said simply. She recounted how the school had responded to Jason's behavior and how she had noticed support from her classmates. Her father listened carefully, nodding in understanding. "I'm proud of you," he said finally, "not just because of what happened with Jason, but because of how you're handling it. You're learning that courage isn't just about facing others. It's also about facing yourself and your own fears. You're growing stronger every day." Aaliyah felt a deep sense of gratitude. She understood now that true strength wasn't about showing off or seeking revenge. It was about maintaining dignity, choosing wisely when to act, and understanding the value of support. Her father's guidance, combined with her personal growth, had given her a sense of empowerment she would carry forward. That evening, Aaliyah reflected on the changes she had noticed in Jason. She saw that he was quieter, more cautious, and perhaps even introspective. While she didn't wish him harm, she realized that consequences could lead to reflection and change. Accountability was a part of life, and facing it could be a powerful teacher. She hoped that he would learn from this experience, just as she had learned from facing her fears. Aaliyah also thought about her classmates. The subtle gestures of support, the encouraging smiles, and the whispered words of kindness had reminded her that she wasn't alone. Strength wasn't always solitary. It was often reinforced by the presence and encouragement of others. She began to understand the importance of building connections, of being kind, and of supporting others when they faced challenges. As night fell, Aaliyah prepared for bed, her mind filled with thoughts of growth, resilience, and empowerment. She reflected on the journey she had taken over the past few days, the fear she had felt, the confrontations she had endured, and the lessons she had learned. Each moment had contributed to her understanding of courage, self-respect, and the value of support. Before closing her eyes, she made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to face challenges with integrity, to protect her boundaries, and to remain true to who she was. She would support others who faced difficulties just as she had been supported, and she would remember that strength came not only from confronting fear, but from understanding it and choosing to act with dignity. Aaliyah drifted into sleep with a sense of calm and confidence. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she had the resilience to navigate them. She had faced fear, experienced growth, and discovered the power of courage, support, and self-belief. And with those lessons in her heart, she felt ready to face whatever the future might hold. The next morning, Aaliyah woke up feeling a sense of anticipation mixed with calm. The events of the past few days had changed her perspective. She had faced fear, experienced intimidation, and discovered a resilience she hadn't fully recognized before. Today felt like a new chapter, one where she could embrace her strength and live without being overshadowed by anxiety. As she walked into school, the hallway seemed lighter somehow. Students moved through their routines, some glancing her way with respect or curiosity, but none approached with hostility. Aaliyah noticed Jason walking a few steps behind, quieter than usual, his usual arrogance diminished. He avoided eye contact, a subtle but noticeable change in behavior that reflected the consequences he had begun to face. During her first class, Aaliyah answered questions confidently, her voice steady and clear. Her classmates listened attentively, some nodding in agreement, others scribbling notes. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her presence was making a positive impression. It wasn't about showing off. It was about feeling recognized for her intelligence and composure. At lunch, Aliyah chose a table with her friends, sharing stories and laughter. The room felt lighter, filled with camaraderie rather than tension. Even Jason and his friends sat across the cafeteria, their voices subdued, avoiding any confrontation. Aliyah realized that balance had shifted in subtle ways. Respect and accountability had begun to replace fear. Later, in a quiet moment between classes, a teacher approached Aliyah. "I want you to know that your courage hasn't gone unnoticed," the teacher said. "Standing up for yourself while maintaining composure is something rare. You've inspired others to do the same." Aliyah felt a deep sense of validation. She had not only protected herself but also shown her peers that strength could be measured in more than physical confrontation. As the day continued, Aliyah observed Jason's gradual acknowledgement of his actions. He had meetings with teachers and administrators, discussing his behavior and understanding the impact of bullying. Aliyah watched from a distance, feeling a mix of relief and hope. She understood that consequences, while uncomfortable, were necessary for growth. People could change if given the opportunity to reflect on their mistakes. After school, Aliyah walked home, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the streets. She felt a sense of empowerment and clarity. She reflected on her journey, the fear she had felt, the confrontations with Jason, and the lessons she had learned about courage, integrity, and self-respect. Each step reminded her of the inner strength she had discovered. When she arrived home, her father was waiting. Vin Diesel greeted her with a warm smile. "How was school today?" he asked. Aliyah smiled back. "It was a good day," she said. She recounted the support from classmates, the small but meaningful changes in Jason's behavior, and the encouragement she had received from teachers. Her father listened, nodding, his expression proud. "I'm proud of you," he said finally. "Not because of who I am, but because of who you are. You've learned to stand firm, to understand your worth, and to navigate challenges with courage and dignity. These are lessons that will serve you for a lifetime." His words resonated deeply. Aliyah felt a sense of completeness, knowing that her growth was not just about dealing with bullies but about becoming a stronger, more self-aware person. That evening, Aliyah spent time reflecting in her room. She thought about the experiences that had shaped her over the past days and weeks. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, but she now had the tools to face them. Courage, self-respect, and support were the pillars she could rely on, and she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. Aliyah also considered the importance of helping others. She realized that her experiences could inspire those who were facing difficulties of their own. She began to think about ways to support friends and classmates, to offer encouragement and guidance when they needed it. The lessons she had learned were not just for herself. They could benefit the people around her as well. As night fell, Aliyah prepared for bed, her mind at peace. She felt gratitude for the guidance of her father, the support of her friends, and the lessons life had provided. She understood that strength was not about being fearless, but about facing fear with determination and grace. She had confronted challenges, maintained her dignity, and grown as a person. Before drifting off to sleep, Aliyah made a final promise to herself. She would continue to face challenges with integrity, to protect herself and others, and to embrace her personal growth. She would remember the courage she had discovered, and the resilience that had carried her through difficult days. And she would continue to build a life defined not by fear or intimidation, but by strength, compassion, and self-awareness. The school year continued, and Aliyah moved forward with confidence. She excelled in her classes, nurtured friendships, and became a source of encouragement for others. Jason, now more reflective, adjusted his behavior and learned the importance of accountability. The events that had once been filled with tension transformed into opportunities for personal growth for everyone involved. Aliyah's journey was a testament to the power of courage, integrity, and support. She had faced fear, confronted challenges, and emerged stronger. Her experiences had taught her that true strength came from within, from understanding one's worth and from standing up for oneself and others. And with these lessons firmly rooted in her heart, she felt ready to embrace the future with confidence and hope, knowing that she could navigate life's obstacles with resilience and grace. The following morning, Aliyah woke up with a mixture of determination and anxiety. She had spent the night thinking about the previous day and the confrontation with Jason. She knew he would be watching for another opportunity to assert his power, and she couldn't ignore the possibility that he might escalate. She tried to focus on the school day ahead, reminding herself of her father's words about strength, courage, and self-belief. When she arrived at school, the hallways were bustling with students as usual. Aliyah moved carefully, her backpack firmly on her shoulders, keeping her head down and avoiding eye contact with groups of students that could pose a threat. She had learned that morning vigilance could prevent many potential confrontations. However, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was about to unfold. Jason was already at the lockers when she approached. His presence was almost magnetic, drawing attention from nearby students. He didn't move immediately, just watched her with a smirk, like a predator sizing up his prey. Aliyah felt a mixture of fear and resolve. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing her scared, but she couldn't deny the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Jason finally spoke, his voice carrying across the hallway. "Looks like someone is getting used to being watched, huh?" He pushed his shoulder against hers lightly, trying to unbalance her. Aliyah held her ground, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "I'm not afraid of you," she said quietly, though she knew that it might not deter him. Just then, one of the teachers, who had been observing from a distance, stepped closer. "Is everything all right here?" the teacher asked. Jason quickly straightened up, pretending nothing had happened, and gave a forced smile. The teacher's eyes lingered on him for a moment, then nodded and walked away. Jason's friends snickered quietly, clearly enjoying the small display of control he maintained. Despite the minor reprieve, Aliyah felt the tension lingering. She went to her first class of the day, trying to focus on her studies, but her mind kept wandering back to Jason. She knew that waiting for someone else to intervene might not be enough. She needed to be prepared for whatever could happen next. Later in the day, during lunch, Aliyah decided to sit outside the cafeteria. The open space allowed her to see potential threats before they approached. She unpacked her lunch and tried to enjoy the moment of calm. Though her nerves remained taut, it was then that her phone buzzed. A text from her father appeared. "Are you okay? Remember, stay calm and be careful. We'll handle this together." Aliyah felt a surge of comfort. Knowing that her father was aware and ready to act made the weight of the day a little lighter. Not long after, Jason and his friends appeared, approaching her with the same smirk that had unsettled her so many times. Jason stopped a few feet away, trying to look casual but clearly aiming to intimidate. Aliyah took a deep breath, keeping her posture firm. She didn't look away, meeting his gaze directly. Jason leaned on the nearby railing, pretending to be relaxed. "You know, you don't have to be so tough all the time," he said. "It's just easier if you play along and let me handle things." His words were meant to provoke, but Aliyah remained composed. She knew that showing fear could give him more power than he deserved. Suddenly, the air shifted. A car pulled up near the school entrance, drawing the attention of nearby students. Aliyah's father, Vin Diesel, stepped out. His presence was commanding, and even from a distance, the authority in his stance was unmistakable. Jason's smirk faltered slightly as he realized that this wasn't going to be a normal day. Vin Diesel approached calmly, his eyes scanning the area until they met Aliyah's. She felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. He didn't rush in aggressively or yell. Instead, his calm authority seemed to speak louder than words. The crowd of students began to murmur, sensing the tension and the presence of someone important. Jason's friend stepped back, unsure how to react. Jason himself tried to maintain his bravado, but it was clear that he was unnerved. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice attempting to sound casual, but the edge of fear was noticeable.